I just want to start by thanking you all for coming. It's such a crazy weather outside, so really appreciate you coming. And I really want to thank the Flutter community for embracing us. You know, I was at the event last month, the Flutter production, and I met the guys at GDG Montreal. So I just want to say a huge thank you to the organizers, Billy, Jin, and Ali. Thank you so much, guys. And I just want to say, the Flutter community in general has been so positive and open and welcoming to us. So I really want to thank the Flutter community. You know, Circle Medical, the whole Flutter journey is fresh, it's new. You know, it's super fresh. So we're learning every day, and the community's been super open. So you'll be hearing from us a lot. You know, we'll be reaching out more for help. I'm sure there's going to be surprises along the way. So thank you so much for coming. What else can I say? Circle Medical. Oh yeah, so what am I going to talk about? So native to Flutter, right? So the Circle app, I don't know where it went, it disappeared. Yeah, so Circle app started 8 years ago. iOS, it started on iOS, then they built an Android. And you can imagine 8 years later, the tech that it's taken, you know? And so, you know, about 2.5 years ago, I started at Circle. I was an iOS dev, and you know what inspired this talk was when I told one of our junior devs, well, he's not a junior anymore, he's a mid, but you know, the comment he made was, wow, I can't believe we're actually doing it, you know? I mean, imagine you're at a company with an established native app, you know, and it's so hard to kind of convince people to, let's go into Flutter, let's try something new, you know? So I just wanted to share the experience of how we got there, a little bit of like, you know, how we got there. And by the way, I'm like completely off script, so if you guys have any questions, like please feel free to jump in, you know? So I'll show you guys the app real quick. And it's not working. Hey, there we go. Hey.
Is this the Flutter app?
This is the iOS app, right? So we actually haven't released the Flutter yet, right? So why isn't it working? So it's basically an app that you can use, right? You create an account, and then you go in the app. You can book an appointment. When you book an appointment, and I'll show you. You can schedule the doctor. You know what? I'm gonna forget about the demo because it's not working. But schedule a doctor, right? You book a time, and it's to have like basically a Zoom call of a doctor, a doctor's appointment. And it's in the US. So a couple tricky things about that. Number one is like insurance in the US is like such a huge pain point, figuring out which doctor can I go see, what is covered, you know, what can my doctor talk to me about. You know, depending on the state, some doctors can see, some doctors can't. So there's a huge part of the back end that manages all the insurance stuff. We also manage the booking, right? Finding the right time with the doctor. Then you have the call, the video call. During the video call, the doctor uses another tool that we have. They use like a web tool called Helix. And with that tool, you know, they check the patient's medical data and they prescribe medications. And then for the app, you can follow your prescription and go pick up the prescription at the clinic. So we have the whole thing, you know, we handle the payment, we hire the doctors, we pay the doctors. So it's one big kind of crazy machine. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you use for payment providers?
What do we use for them?
Yes.
Like, what do you mean, like?
Payment providers, like Stripe or...
Oh, yeah, we use Stripe. Yeah, we use Stripe. So Stripe is when you have a credit card, but most of our patients use insurance, so we handle that. But we also got the Stripe. Great question. So a few other things I wanted to mention is for analytics, we use Amplitude. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Amplitude, Rudder Stack, and we use growth book for feature flags. So we have the ability to toggle features of flags. We have the ability to run experiments. So we run experiments to see if something's working or not. We use Sentry for crash reporting. We use Zoom for the video calls. And what am I forgetting? We also have something that verifies the ID, right? You have to have a valid ID to do an appointment. And the reason I'm mentioning all these SDKs is because it was part of the decision of why Flutter, right? So now that you know kind of what it is, how do we get to Flutter? Well, what happened was, I'm the engineering manager, right? I used to be a dev, then I went into management. And one thing that kept coming up is my devs were saying, hey, we want to try out Flutter. I want to try out Flutter. And at the beginning, I used to be against it. You know, I used to be an iOS native, hardcore purist. I said, oh, it has to be iOS. You know, you need to have that cutting edge user experience. But after a few years of working with this app, I realized that, you know, our patients aren't platform sensitive, you know? It's not like the end of the world if it's not like a sexy animation, you know, or like, and all that. So I eventually started to think, you know what, I'm being too hardcore about this. And what really, you know, pushed me over the edge is the devs kept asking me about Flutter. Say, hey, we want to do Flutter, hey, we want to do Flutter. So eventually I was like, you know what, like, we got to do this. The thing is, our CTO was a bit shy to try something new, you know? The big kind of drawbacks are, oh, well, will the devs be able to learn Flutter, you know? What do you guys think? Will they be able to learn Dart, you know? Is there a big enough community to hire in, you know? For example, we have a backend in Ruby, and we did struggle to hire Ruby devs. You know, Montreal's a nice, strong Ruby community. We still struggle to hire Ruby devs. So I think it's a little bit of PTSD of like, will we be able to hire Flutter devs? So that was a big point. You know, and so I kind of went back and forth. And then one day there was like this magic moment where I was in a meeting with the CTO and 2 other EMs. And I saw the opportunity, you know, I saw it and I was like, for some reason, you know, one of the other EMs said, oh, you know, Flutter is not that bad. And I jumped on and I said, hey, we're going to do a proof of concept. And I got 1, 2, 3 okays. Boom, let's go. So we got one of our devs, Mujib. He did a proof of concept. And what he did is he took this feature here. I'm going to see if it works. Is it working? Why isn't it working? No. Should be good. Anyway, this feature here, basically you click on one of these are called areas of care. You click on one, there's another page that opens up, basically static text, and it describes what the area of care is, right? For example, get better sleep, right? Some patients have trouble sleeping. We specialize in that. So there's another page that opens up, static text with a static image. Here's how we treat sleep. You hit a button, and then it takes you to book an appointment. So what Mujib did is, he basically just did that one static screen. And he's like, look, proof of concept. For each area of care, we'll just duplicate the screen. And we started to do it. And it was really just a proof of concept. Like, we weren't trying to sell like, hey, let's go to Flutter. It was just like, hey, let's just do this for fun. So Mujib starts working on the proof of concept. And then I go on vacation, right? And then when I come back from vacation, I find out that we're going to restructure the whole engineering development cycle, the way we manage development. By the way, I forgot to check the time. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes? Okay, cool. That's going fast. All right. I didn't even get started, man. All right. You told me. I get back from vacation, they're like, we're doing this pods thing, right? So what is pods, right? Pods is, so what we had before is we had one Scrum board, right? And all the mobile tickets are on the same board. And I had 3 different PMs coming to me, and they're all saying, oh, Alex, we gotta do this. Oh, we gotta do this. And the prioritization, imagine, it was complete chaos, right? Oh, my thing's more important, my thing's more important. So then, you know, with pods, what you do is you take a dev from each team, you make a pod, and they focus on one company priority. And when you do that, you know, the devs don't have to worry about context switching, you know? So, sorry. So they come back, they're like, we're doing pods. And I was like, okay, well, thank God that we're doing this Flutter proof of concept, because without that, we'd be screwed. Because we only have 5 mobile devs and they have 8 pods. There's no way we can do more than 1 dev, like two devs per pod. Doesn't make any sense. So went in Flutter. My gosh, the time thing really threw me off. Okay. So, you know, why Flutter, right? I mean, a lot of the web devs said, oh, we got to do React.js. You know, we got to do React.js. Oh, no, React Native. The thing is, you know, React Native, I don't know. I haven't used it that much, but the vibe I got is that it's so web focused. And all my devs were asking for Flutter. So I'm like, well, go what the dev wants, you know? So the community, the devs, that's really what pushed us to Flutter. Also, we noticed that all these SDKs had Flutter equivalents. So that's a good one. The demo, proof of concept, it was working. We're happy with that. Happy with the UI. And you know, one thing I wanted to kind of mention before ending the talk is like the challenges that I foresee coming. And I want to ask you guys if you've experienced any of these challenges, right? So one challenge is we have a design system for Android and iOS, right? So our designer will design a component, and then, you know, we make it Android, make it iOS, both. And now we're going to add Flutter. Okay, so the other thing is, the way we're going to do Flutter is we're going to inject a screen one at a time, right, into the app. And Florian will talk a little bit more about that during his talk. But my question is, if we're going to do Flutter on top of iOS, on top of Android, we're going to have to maintain those components across yet another stack, you know? So I was wondering, has anyone here experienced that issue? Awesome. And how did you address it?
We have six ways of rendering.
6 what?
We have 6 ways of rendering.
Of rendering?
Not just Android, iOS. We have small devices, medium devices, because now you have not just phones, but you have phones with 2, like Google Phone.
Right.
And then you have large screens. So
But
3 rendering breakpoints and dynamic feedback between Android, iOS, Mac, Linux, different flavors.
right, but my point is, like, say I have a legacy feature, right, that uses a component that is going to exist in a new feature, right? So we add a new screen that uses that component. How do I maintain the components between the Flutter and the iOS and Android
We
side?
just use material free across the board.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't do sub-theming at the widget level.
Yeah.
It's all material free.
Cool. You know, the other thing I was going to ask is, one other reason we want to go Flutter is that it's going to unify the analytics, right? Because right now we implement analytics on Android, implement analytics on iOS, but you know, it's not consistent between both platforms. Like a click here is a click there. You know what I mean? So with Flutter, you'll be able to have that consistent analytics between the two. But now, how do I maintain a system with the legacy stack and the new Flutter stack? Any thoughts on that?
So you are using a native application and then you put the Flutter app on top of it. So you're actually making kind of hybrid.
We're putting basically we run the engine in the background, and then we just inject the screen. Like,
So you still have the iOS native piece, and then you have Flutter.
right. The other thing I wanted to mention is that one of the big legacy pieces of code is the navigation bar at the bottom, right? We use a coordinator pattern. So there's a coordinator that handles the navigation controller for the tab. and then you hit a button here. That opens up a new coordinator for the new stack that comes up. And that piece is so legacy, it's so spaghetti that's why we wanted the modular approach, right? Because, okay, now we don't need to touch the navigation stack. We can just inject the screen, and we keep the old navigation stack as it is, right? The reason I'm bringing that up is, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much what I wanted to share, you know. So more to come. You know, we haven't delivered it yet. We basically have a phased plan for delivery, and we're hoping to deliver the first feature next quarter. So when we do that, you know, we'll have another talk to share our experience. And thanks for having us. Go ahead, Ali.
Do you have any statistics like how improve your workflow, or do you have any improvement or any I don't know, any stats like revenue wise or something that's when you migrate to the Flutter?
Well, the big gain that we're trying to have is increasing like the developer output, right? Because right now it's each dev, you know, codes a feature on their stack. So for example, I want to code a feature for the billing screen, right? I need one dev to do iOS, one dev to do Android. So now the goal is that when we start implementing Flutter, we can have one dev do both, and you basically cut the time in half. Maybe not half, but like 60%, you know? So that's the real goal, and that's where we're heading to. But we haven't gotten there yet because we haven't released anything yet, right? We're still building the foundation of the code, but that's the real goal for that. You know, the other goal is you save time on design, right? You don't have to do design for both stacks. You save time on implementing analytics, on testing, you know? So those are the real kind of metrics we're going for. So we'll try and have something for next time. Yeah. Awesome. Yes, go ahead.
So you mentioned that you're sort of injecting the screens developed from Flutter to a sort of native environment, right?
Yeah.
My question: why not start from scratch?
Yeah.
That was sort of
Yeah, that's the classic. So the thing is, how do you start from scratch on something that's so, you know, let's call it mature, you know? I mean, the other thing is there's some parts of the app that, you know, are so old that we don't even know, we don't even have the full requirements, right? They're not documented. So when I'm programming something, sometimes the requirement is it has to work like it did before, you know, which is kind of a nightmare for the QE, right? Because they have to go and make sure everything's fine. And so as we're going, okay, now we're documenting as we go. Now we're, you know, keeping it fresh. But the stuff that's old and it's in the back, how can you even replicate it, you know? It's like trying to change the wings on the plane while it's in flight, you know? But we are going to explore the idea of wrapping the whole app in Flutter. The other thing is, you know, because of the concerns from our CTO, we wanted to go with a low-risk approach, and that's why we started with one module at a time. If the first module works, cool, we're good, next one. And then maybe we get 3 or 4, okay, let's wrap the app completely and take the next step. So we're going with a more like a conservative approach. Yeah, I think you had your hand up first, or?
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, we'll go.
Why don't you do Florian first and then we...
Sure, and then we do, yeah, for sure. All right, well, with no further ado, guys, I want to introduce Florian. Florian, I've been working together for a long time. We actually met at TouchTunes, a company before here, and then when we were hiring devs and I saw his name in the thing, I got really excited. So how about a big round of applause for Florian? Oh yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to do it after. Tu peux prendre ton... Ouais, c'est compliqué. Est-ce que c'est un aimant?
Oui, c'est un élément. Je peux mettre là.
Ah ok, c'est là. Je le mettais à l'envers.
Est-ce que tu peux mettre ta main devant la fonction? Juste pour qu'elle...
Faut que je me mette plus. Alex, il était plus... ouais, comme ça?
Mets ta main comme ça devant.
Ok.
Ok, on laisse ça. Ah, c'est bon. Cool.
Ok.
Now we can move. You will follow.
Okay. Let me know if it's good. If not, okay, we are seeing my screen.
Manuellement.
I'm just going to start this in the background while I do the presentation. All right. Well, thank you for coming. It's been really hard to come here on this with this crazy weather, so I'm actually surprised to see that many people. So my name is Florian. I'm a mobile dev at Circle Medical for more than a year now. And I say mobile dev because I used to be Android only, and now I started Flutter. I started 1 month ago, so I'm really, really new. And if I say anything wrong, please stop me and correct me if I'm wrong. But so I took a subject that I think is not so complicated, which is communication between native and Flutter. And I'm curious, does anyone have experience with Meta Channel or Pigeon? Meta Channel or Pigeon? Meta Channel. Meta Channel. Okay, cool. All right. So let's start. So I like to start by answering two questions. What are we talking about and why? So what is communication when we talk about native and Flutter? So basically, sometimes you want to send some information or you want to get some information from Flutter and native, and so you need a tool to do that, and that's communication. And why do we need that? The example that is given in the Flutter documentation is, let's say you want to display the battery level of the phone, and I'm pretty sure there is a library for that in Flutter now, but let's say you don't have a library, then you're going to need to use some type of communication to request that information from the native part so you can display it. And so that's one of the examples. It's not what we use for at Circle Medical. So I would say that's the usual communication part. Like you have a Flutter application, which is the client, and then when you build the Flutter app, it generates the iOS code and the Android code, and you're going to get information from one place or another. And most of you know, some of you know Meta Channel. Yeah. But for us, it's a little bit different. So like Alex said, we have an existing native application, and what we want to do is display some Flutter screen. Well, I know it's more complicated than that. You don't display Flutter screen, like you display the code that is generated by Flutter for the platform. But so we have an Android repo, we have an iOS repo, and we have a Flutter repo, and that makes things complicated. And also, because we basically have to handle 3 different platforms, right, in that scenario. So we have to make sure that the communication is in sync between Android, iOS, and Flutter. So communication have to be really safe for us. It's really important. Maybe before I start going into code, any question from how we use Flutter here at Circle? I think Alex touched point on a lot of topic. Yeah?
I have one question, because you're mentioning that it's hard to communicate, but how do you manage packages? Do you create one package for one feature, then you have every code in one package?
Yeah, that's exactly. So we have one package that is a little bit special, like we can run as a standalone app, is Storyboard. That's what I'm going to display, actually. We have some discussion about that, actually, between the team. I would like to only use package, but some of the dev want to have a standalone application, and it's still in discussion. I didn't let go yet. Any other question before I start to go into meta channel? Actually, I'm going to show you what I'm going to present. I think it's going to make more sense before I dive into the code. So here I'm in Android. Okay. So what you're seeing here is our debug menu. So this is native. If I go into the feature flag setting, this is native. But here, this is Flutter. We can see it. It's not what I wanted to show. OK, let me switch app. I had a backup plan. So this is the storybook that I was talking about. We have all the color that the application is using, and we have some button that, and we're going to add more and more stuff, like different text style and all that stuff, all the component basically. So now let's jump into the code. So I was able to compile just before, like when I arrived here. I was having trouble with Gradle all day, and it looked like it's not working again. So we'll see how this goes. So let me increase the font a little bit because I hope you, yeah. All right, so here we are in the Flutter project, and I'm using the meta channel implementation. So, and maybe I should just go back to the application. Sorry, Juk. So here, what I'm going to focus on is when I press on the native part. So actually, I'm starting the navigation, and we have another concept of like, now we are in Flutter, and we're going to pass the event from Flutter to native. So when I click on the cross to close the screen, that's another another communication, I would say, another messaging part. So maybe when I go into the code, it's going to make more sense. So here I'm going to focus on navigation. So we created a method channel. Actually, this method channel is going to be used everywhere in the app. And what we're going to do is we're going to filter the method call. So it's not super clear now, but hang on tight. So to use method channel, you need to create a method channel object. So it takes a string, the name. And then once you have this method channel, you can call the set method call handler. And basically, it's just a feature. And here, it provides a method call. So I'm going to go into the method call. I have to zoom all the time because, OK, I didn't put the presentation mode. So the method call is basically the method name and argument. Argument is dynamic, so you will have to cast it to the type you expect. So here, basically what we do is we receive all the event from native, and we're going to filter the one that we support. So we have to make sure that, if I go into the method, the function that was called has the name present route. And finally, so if I do this, normally it should jump. Yeah. So here I'm in the main function of the app, of the Flutter app, and that's the callback. So here we are casting the argument to the type string, optional string, and then we're going to present the screen that we want. So if I go into feature one lib, here we define the name of the route, and it's also a string. So if I resume everything. For method channel, you need to specify one string for the method channel. You need to specify one string for the function that will be called. And you're also going to specify, well, the argument. In our case, it's a string. So now remember that we have iOS, Android, and Flutter. And all of that have to be in sync, right? And I think a lot of things can go wrong using that. So, and we're going to rely heavily on communication, right? Because we're going to use it for showing specific screen, but we're also going to listen for events that are sent from Flutter to our application. Any question before I go into the Android implementation? Yeah?
This works well for stateless flows. How do you handle stateful flows with dynamic objects or very big objects?
We are not planning on using that for communication. You mean like, let's say I have a stream of data from the native side, and I want to pass to Flutter. We're not going to do this. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to pass simple object. And for example, if we want to send some live data, let's say the patient object update. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to collect. We are using coroutine on Android, so we're going to collect those change, and we're just going to call the function to pass the data. It's not going to be a stream that we're going to pass. We're just going to pass the data to Flutter. But I know that we are using also RX3, and I believe there is a library in Flutter that is compatible with RX3, so we could potentially pass the reference of the observable to Flutter, but I don't think we're going to go that route. And I don't really see a scenario where we're going to need it. Yeah.
In simpler use cases like GWT of a user, ML context, things that are not stored in the backend but only stored in the client.
So one way that we did is if it's a simple object, we are using shared preference to pass data between native and Flutter. But yeah, we could easily use, so those, what you refer to are not going to be streamed, right? Is not going to be, so, yeah, so,
It's streamable, but it's more complex.
So, I mean, you can pass any kind of data using method channel or Pigeon. Maybe I can go deeper into Pigeon later. It's just that using method channel, you will have to cast your object, and a lot of things can go wrong, right? Pigeon do it for you. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, though.
No, but it answers the question. You're using shared preferences as a cache between both layers.
Kind of, yeah. Any other question?
Just really quick, you mentioned that a lot of things go wrong with implementation. Explain.
Well, let's say I'm working on Flutter, on the Flutter part, and I'm working on Android because I always have a tendency to work on Android first because that's what I like the most. So, and let's say something stupid, I change this string here, and I'm gonna test it on Android. So I'm gonna, well, let's jump into Android. I'm gonna change it here, and I push the code in Git, and I forget to update this on iOS, right? And well, iOS will compile fine, and well, if nobody tests this feature and it goes live in prod, well, feature 1 is not available. So that thing that scared me. So that's why I started to look more into alternative. But I think we are jumping ahead here. So let's go back. I think the presentation is already really long. I'll have to speed up a little bit. So not going to go into too much detail, but so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, so you see when you press the button to display the Flutter module, what we're going to do actually is start an activity, and we're going to create the method channel. So we have to use the same method channel name. Then we have to use the same method name, and then the same argument. And well, like I said, a lot of things can go wrong, and so, but you can still know about it. So if you have the on success, success, error, and not implemented function, depending on the result of trying to display the feature. Yeah, that's pretty much it actually for the Android implementation. So I'm going to go back to the presentation, and I'm going to talk about the method channel pros and cons. So the pros is that it's doing the job. It allows communication between native and Flutter. It's lightweight. You see that you don't need a lot of setup. You just need to define the string and make sure you use the same one. And it works well for simple case. But the cons are you have a lot of magic string, and you cannot have a constant somewhere that sits between native and Flutter. So of course, you can have the constant on each project, but you always have to make sure that the constant is the same everywhere. So and that's what makes it not safe. You will compile the project just fine if you're not having the same, if the method channel are not configured properly. And the only way to find out an issue is by actually testing, and that's a little bit scary, like I said before. And it's a little bit of boilerplate, like you always have to have the success, error, and not implemented function, and you have to set up all those strings. So a little bit of boilerplate. So you must think there must be a better way, right? And yes, there is. Pigeon. Actually, when you start to read the documentation about communication on the Flutter documentation, they mention first method channel, and right after they say, but if you want to have type safety, have a look at Pigeon. So let's see how it works. And I'm going to try to compile again and hope for the best. Check out. Am I good on time? I can speed up a little bit. I'm seeing people checking their watch. Okay, middle strap. Okay. So I'm not going to go into how to add the library into the project. I think that's pretty simple. Let's zoom in. So what you need to do is you create a file that is going to define how the Pigeon library generates the file. Because the way we have type safety communication between projects is by actually generating file from that file. So for the setup, you just need to specify the class name and the path where the file is going to sit. And you have some option like defining the package name and the error class. And that's it. Here, what I'm doing is I'm creating an abstract class called Flutter Navigation. So this class is going to be used by Android and Flutter, but on the Android side, we're going to create an object, Flutter Navigation, and we're going to call the route. And on Flutter, we're just going to implement this abstract class and get the function call when it receives an event. So right now, we just have one storybook. Yeah. So let's see how it's used on Flutter. I'm going to zoom in again. So Flutter Navigation. So I created this class, navigation handler that implements Flutter Navigation that override the goto function. And so I do some setup, and that's pretty much it for the Flutter part. Now, every time iOS, Android is going to send an event, so this goto function will be triggered, and we're going to call this present route. And actually here in the build feature, we're actually going to match the route with the proper screen to show. And oops, if I go on Android, I'm going to switch again. Integration with Pigeon checkout. Change here. Please, Gradle, help me why you don't want to cooperate today. Well, so we're going to see a little bit of red, but that's not too bad. So remember when we talk about meta channel to start a specific Flutter screen? This is done here. So I'm going to create, like I said before, the Flutter navigation object that takes a binary messenger. And what I can do is just use this Flutter navigation go-to function and pass the route that I want to go to. So I cannot pass anything that is not supported, right? It has to be something of that type. So, okay, maybe you just want to import the class. No, you don't want. So let's go back actually to the Flutter. I forgot to mention how to generate the file. So once you created your file here, you actually have to tell the library to generate those files. And the way you do it is by calling run Pigeon input with the file name. But what I did is created a script that will go over the Pigeon folder, so where we define the class that need to be generated, and is going to generate all those files. So just to show you that I'm not lying, I'm gonna delete. Here. Wow, so much red. I don't know what's going on. Delete. Okay. Now I'm gonna run regenerate Pigeon. I'm gonna go to Android. And they are generated. So you might say, okay, but let's say you add a new feature. So let's go into the other part, not the navigation part, really quickly. Debug menu. So this is about the interaction. So because, that's something I forgot to mention, when you want to, when what you want to do is navigate, communicate from native to Flutter, you're going to add the annotation Flutter API. And when you want to do the opposite way, you're going to use the host API annotation. And so let's add, show. And I'm going to go a little bit crazy and see. So pretty sure it's going to fail. So what you want to do is make sure that every time you compile, you have the latest generated file. It's ambiguous. Let me try to delete this, see what it says. Okay. I'm not lucky today. Nothing is working. But to make sure that you always have the latest generated file, what I do is I created a task on Gradle to run before we actually do the build. So it's going to generate all my file. So I'm sure that every time I build, I have the latest implementation, I would say, of Flutter, and is going to make sure that at compile time, that everything is in sync between my Flutter code and my native code. I really don't understand why it's failing, but anyway. So, any question from what you've seen so far? Yeah?
This Gradle task that you're running,
Yeah.
it's running the script that you just showed us, right? But that script is in the Flutter project?
Yeah.
So how is it working?
So that's something I'm going to show later in the presentation. So you have to make sure that all the devs have the same project structure. Basically, iOS, Android, and Flutter have to live under the same folder, just to make sure that all the paths that I showed you before in the config file are the same. And also, the script that I've added, it sits in Flutter. So this Gradle task point to the Flutter project, in the Flutter project to the script, yeah. I mean, I could put it somewhere else. I could put it at the root, but since, like, I believe it makes more sense to have it on the Flutter side because that's where you create your Pigeon file that's going to use, yeah. But it can be anywhere. I mean, it can be even outside of the, yeah. You just have to point to the right path.
This is the Android project of your Flutter project.
So that's the native application here.
This is the native. Okay, so it's because in Flutter you have a
Yeah.
folder for Android.
Yeah.
This is not that.
No, it's not that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it's like Inception, right? We have native, Flutter, and then native again. Yeah, I know. And one reason why, at the beginning, we mentioned that we have one module that runs as a standalone app is, and we commit all, so if I switch here, you see this storybook? We have the Android and iOS folder to run as a standalone app, and I really don't like that. Like, we have, yeah, like you said, like we have Android, Flutter, and then Android again. So that's why I'm still fighting to remove that and only use module, so we don't have those. But every time so what I want to, maybe I go too much into this, but we have this core module that I use to check the UI that I'm working on. So I'm not sure what the right word to say is. It's compile, like I'm running this core module and it's going to generate the Android code. So that's what I do. But yeah, I don't want to come in a state where every module have the Android and iOS. That's going to be horrible, I think. Sorry, I'm just talking about my problem here. Any other question? Yeah.
Before asking my question, I just want to see maybe your perspective of the Flutter app.
So, let me go.
I don't want to challenge you to challenge. Okay, that's
No. So we actually.
Flutter app that
So I'm not too comfortable about that because it's another dev that work on that. But we introduced Mellow because, like, for every, yeah. You answer my question.
I was maintaining patient.
So, no, because yeah, every module have the configuration file, and actually I fight for that too. I don't want to have different version of library in module, so I has to find a way to make sure that all the modules use the same version. So that's why we introduced Mellow. So.
I will ask my question at the end.
Okay. All right. Yep.
You could also use a stronger formatting structure instead of JSON or strings. For example, we use protobuf because we started our implementation before Pigeon came out. So
Yeah, for sure. But
a more strongly typed
for sure.
message passing technology.
And I mean, you also have library. I don't remember the name, but that just help you generate file. And I start to look into this. But actually, when I start to look into it, I was like, why should I build the Pigeon library, right? So you can, for sure, you can have some class that take care of the like using a JSON to pass data around. But like we have so much work to do. If a library can help us do things faster, I think we should.
It would actually slow you down at runtime. If you're using Pigeon, you're pickling and using a lot more runtime information that you need to compared to using purely web business objects.
But so.
About 100 times.
So if you do the, I'm not sure how you can use JSON to make sure that to remove those magic string that I showed before.
It's not JSON anymore, it's protobuf.
So you have to introduce a complete new.
Because we use protobuf at scale.
Yeah, but
all our technologies, so we don't use JSON.
But
It's not strong.
so
what communication?
For Protobuf is the format.
Yeah, it's a format, but how can you pass it?
Mr. Chang.
To the method channel, right? Yeah.
But so protobuf is to pass data between between Flutter and native, right? But
It's just
how?
data format.
You
Right?
just
Yeah, it's just a data format. That's I get it. So you don't have to. So you don't have to take care of the casting of the argument, right? But how do you make sure that at compile time the communication is not broke?
Protobuf fact that the contract that will be generated, the contract that will be generated at the host, the contract that you will have on the client,
Is always the
protobuf
same.
could be the same, so you don't touch anything. When you generate a protobuf, the thing you got on the host is the same thing you got on the client.
So basically,
The code of Pigeon, actually.
okay.
When you go in your file and you have your DAO,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
your generation, I think, was .sh.
Yep.
You have your DAO, bash, I think, was Pigeon. The file that is generated because you didn't show that you have one file that's generated, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, you have, yeah,
So that's the way for you to ensure that
yeah, exactly, yeah. It's the generated file that makes everything safe. But maybe I don't know enough about photobuffer, but okay. But yeah. Any other question?
Actually, yeah.
You're on time? All right. So I'm going to speed it up. Pros and cons, type safety, code generation, and improve readability, reliability. Cons, small learning curve, code generation, it can be an overhead, and debugging with code generation can also be challenging. And I asked many times if you had any questions, so I guess you don't have any more.